Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's podcast. Today we have on the show a very dear friend of mine, Kathleen Evans. I met Kathleen, oh my goodness, it's probably been, it's like 10 years ago, in Costa Rica. We met briefly after I moved there, and I don't recall now who was living there first, but she is a dear friend of mine. She's working towards her citizenship there, so her path has been a little bit different than mine. But I'm so excited to have her on the show today, and so you can listen to her about her journey, her experience, and what she's doing next. Welcome to the show today. Thanks for joining us. Today we have Kathleen Evans joining us, and she is a friend of mine that I met when I was living in Costa Rica. So thank you, Kathleen, for joining us today.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast, Sally. I think it's so cool that you're launching this whole global citizen thing, because there's just not enough good guides out there with real life stories. So this is very exciting to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And so obviously, as I said, we met in Costa Rica. So
Yes.
you were living in Costa Rica. So why don't you give the
Yes.
listeners a little bit of a history background as to where you came from, how you got to Costa Rica, what you're doing now, and those types of things.
Yeah, so I've always been a traveler. My mom kind of planted that seed early in life with my first passport. And ever since then, I always wanted to live somewhere exotic, somewhere different, embrace a new culture. And I had a couple of little tastes of that. I'm originally from Chicago and had a little taste overseas when I studied in England. And then at one point, I kind of had my midlife crisis early and traveled around the world and spent quite a bit of time in South Africa. And I knew it at some point I was going to be living overseas somewhere. So,
Okay.
So that was kind of where the seed was planted. And then there was this little magazine I found in the 1990s called International Living. And it was kind of, at that time, it was pre-internet. And it was kind of the only resource I knew of at the time where you could actually learn about people who really lived overseas. Now, their target was more of a retirement kind of thing, but that's kind of evolved into many different things now that there's digital nomads and that sort of thing. But that was kind of the catalyst. And I said, if other people can do it, why can't I? Right. So my husband and I started researching places for many years, actually. We were still working. I was in the corporate grind. And we would go on vacation and say, hey, could we live here? Maybe we could. Oh, let's go look at real estate. Let's look at the cost of living. What's it like? So we did that actually for many years. And then the corporate grind got a little
too grindy.
I don't want to say grinder because that has a whole different connotation.
Right.
But yeah, and actually started having some stress-related health issues. And my husband said, listen, are we going to do this, or are we going to wait till we're way too old and it becomes just too difficult and we may have mobility issues and health issues? And I said, yeah, let's do it. And the catalyst was to sell our house. And at that time, there was a big, huge housing crash in 2008. And there was no way we were selling our home. So
Mhm.
our plans were delayed, but it did give us a lot of time to look at places that were still on the radar.
Mhm.
And we created a list, kind of a what do we want in this next phase of our life list,
Mhm.
right? So we wanted a country where we could see and hear the ocean every day. So obviously, we wanted to be somewhere coastal.
Mhm.
I never wanted to wear a coat again.
Oh,
It's a
come
big
on.
one for
Don't you
me.
miss that winter in Chicago?
Shoveling snow and your eyelashes freezing and
Yeah.
yeah. Well, you being Canadian, I
Oh,
think
I know, and I don't miss it at all. I do not miss winter. I absolutely hate the cold. So, yeah, I
we're
totally
on the same
understand.
page. So that was one of them. So obviously we're narrowing down places on Earth.
Mhm.
We're starting
Mhm.
to get a little tropical here. We also wanted a stable democracy. Whatever stability is at this point is a
Mhm.
question, but this was quite a few years ago we were researching.
Right.
And we wanted an educated population,
Mhm.
and no military was a bonus.
Yes.
Okay, so all right, narrowing down. We wanted to be able to qualify for residency. There
Right.
are places that make it extremely difficult, as you know,
Mhm.
um,
Or very
and
expensive.
or very expensive. And we wanted a straightforward pathway
Mhm.
to be able to do it. So not too complicated,
Right.
although we're starting to learn pretty much everywhere is a little complicated.
There's always some complications, but some places are
Yeah.
definitely a lot more complicated than others.
Right. So coming from the States, we were looking for a place where we would have access to good universal health care as well. Because
Mm.
that's something we didn't have. And most Americans that work in corporate America, once they leave, they don't have health insurance of any kind.
Right. And that
So
gets
they have
very
to,
expensive to get
and
health
it's
insurance, especially by the time they leave, getting closer to those retirement ages. Even if they leave early, the older you are, the more expensive it becomes.
exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. So that was actually quite important for us. We also wanted to be able to have a clear title ownership of
Mm.
property or a business as a foreigner.
Mhm.
And again, there are some countries that you can't really do that,
Right.
or you have to be in partnership with a local, or however that would work. So we also wanted ease for travel back and forth to the United States.
Mhm.
We still had family there. I have an aging parent. There are reasons sometimes to get back quickly.
Mhm.
So we wanted to have that option. We were also looking for an overall lower cost of living than in the United States, which is pretty easy to do. Things are quite expensive, although, this was long before the inflation we're seeing these days.
Right. And you
Um,
also have to compare apples to apples. Like when people say they want that I've heard people say, well, it's very inexpensive in the United States. And sure, I'm sure in some
mhm,
areas, some states
mhm.
in the middle of the countryside, it can be very expensive, but you can't compare that to living in a major city in another country. So it has to be comparable.
Right,
Mhm.
exactly. So we were looking at something very overall.
Right.
Okay. Bottom
Mhm.
line, end of the year, we would like to spend at least 25% less for our lifestyle than we do in the US,
Right.
which is kind of a very realistic number for a lot of
Mhm.
places. But it does kind of cut out some of these, we're looking at tropical places, and a lot of these Caribbean islands are fabulous,
Mhm.
but they're very expensive to live. Yeah,
Yes, because the just getting everything to the island, right? So
right,
housing is more
right.
expensive because they have to get all the stuff there to build the house. Food can become more expensive. Anything that's imported, anything that they can grow, great,
Mhm.
it's inexpensive, but import obviously then becomes a lot more.
Right, right. So we also wanted to live in a place where there's entertainment, a lot of different restaurants, live music, access to the arts, maybe not, within 10 miles, but
Mhm.
someplace where you're not stuck on an island. There
Right.
is, you can get in your car and drive somewhere, or a short hop on a flight.
Mhm.
So we were looking for that. And one of the key factors that really kind of started narrowing things down within the hemisphere was the ability to drink water out of the tap safely.
That's one
Yeah.
that people don't really think about.
Right.
It's not something that people think about, but it is very important, and
Mhm.
it makes a difference. And especially now with water becoming, what's the word that I'm looking for? I mean, just water levels in lots of places, it's becoming
Mhm.
more rare, and it is going to be a concern. I think that people need to start thinking about now where they want to live and how much fresh water is available.
Exactly. Exactly. So once we traveled with this list of criteria,
Mhm.
it became pretty evident that Costa Rica was one of the places that ticked every box.
Right.
I would say there's a number of others, but those
Mhm.
numbers are pretty small.
Mhm.
We considered Panama, we considered several Latin American places, but again, it brings you back to the stability and the
Mhm.
tap water issue.
Right.
So Costa Rica became the place, and we researched it for many, many years, partly because we couldn't sell our house.
So you had the time.
We had the time, but I see a lot of people fail when they decide to move somewhere
Mhm.
overseas because they don't do their due diligence,
Right.
and that's extremely important.
It is. Due diligence is important, but also, um, I've been talking with many people, and obviously
Mhm.
interviewing more people and stuff with the
Mhm.
podcast now, and people don't go through a list of what they want, what's important to them. Like they think,
Mhm.
oh, I'll go to Costa Rica because it's tropical and beautiful and it has beautiful beaches and it's great. And yes, it is, but it's also one thing to go somewhere on vacation and enjoy a vacation for even a month. A month anywhere is fabulous, but to live is completely different. And
Mhm.
I've seen many times, people said, I've seen posts, oh, we're selling everything, we moved to Spain. I saw one recently, moved to Spain, we've been here a year, yeah, it's not our thing, we're selling everything and moving back to the United States. And I just think, like, that's so much, like, and I can understand if maybe there was a health problem or a family thing, like sometimes things do happen, but
Yeah.
did you do your research? Did you check it out? Did you spend time before going? I mean, there's so many things. Did you think about what you really want? And your list was great because there was very specific things in there that were important that nobody that I've talked to, or at least have interviewed, had mentioned a number of those things that you have mentioned.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so with me, when I'm working with people, I have a number of things. Like I can ask them 10 questions just off the top of my head, and right away they're like, oh, never
Oh,
really
didn't
thought
think
of
of that.
that. And it's like those are just the basic basics. Like that's not even getting into like true details about the lifestyle, how you're going to live, how you're going to what you're going to do for work, or do you have investment, or like
Mhm.
getting down into the true details of things that are super important. I mean, it's not like you're on vacation for a month. It's life. It's everything.
Right, right. I get that. But I still, all these years later, oh, how's life on the island? And
I
are you
love that
enjoying that
one.
that umbrella drink on the beach? Okay, one, Costa Rica, just a quick geography lesson. I would think that your audience knows this already,
I
but
hope so, but
Costa Rica is not an island.
well, actually, if we think about it, the Americas is one large island.
One, yes.
So if
So
you
it's
include like
part of it.
Canada, the US, Central America, all the way down, it's one massive island. But you're right.
Right.
Costa
And
Rica is not an island. And I got that so much too. How's island time? I'm like, North America? The
Yeah.
America's island time? Like Costa Rica's not an island.
Right. Yeah. And I am not spending my days with an umbrella drink on the beach.
Oh, really? You're not there every day doing that?
Occasionally I do find time for that, but yeah,
But
it's life. And you
mhm,
have to remember that. I think that's really important for potential expats,
mhm,
that if you're trying to escape something and you're running away from something, but not to something,
mhm.
your risk of failure is going to be higher.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's because you're running away from a problem that you may just bring that problem actually with you.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to really assess why you want to do it.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's not just like laying on a beach and having umbrella drinks. I mean, maybe if somebody's retired, but that gets old really fast too. Some studies have shown that retired people who don't have hobbies tend to not live as long as those who are active and have hobbies and things to do. So it's not like in theory, oh, I'm going to go move here and it's going to be fabulous.
Right.
And I'm just going to enjoy life and do nothing. You'll get bored really fast. Trust me. Like I know. And you have to have hobbies. You have to have things to do. Now, if you're financially stable where you don't have to work, that's great. That's fantastic. But then what are you going to do all day? Because if you're just going to sit around and watch TV, you can do that anywhere. If you're bored where you're at and you want to move, but all you do is watch TV, like you're right. If you're escaping something, you have to think about what that is. Like, what do you want? What are you looking to gain? What do you want to do?
One of the things I do like about Costa Rica is that there are a lot of expat communities. So there's some fairly easy assimilation, especially if you do want to be around English and Spanish speakers. That's pretty easy to find. And there's a lot to do. My husband hates, because he's retired, and he hates when people are like, well, gosh, what do you do all day? But there are so many things to do all day if you want to. And it's not just sitting at a beach bar getting drunk. There's so many outdoor activities, from horseback riding to surfing to golfing. And if you want to learn a new skill, you can take Spanish classes, which is, great work for the mind. You can take art classes. You can learn to paint, pottery. I mean, there's just so many dance lessons, physical kind of things. There's endless possibilities if you put yourself out there and you want to join different groups and get involved. So
yeah, that is Costa Rica is definitely great for that outdoor lifestyle. The same with Spain. I've been living in Spain for several years, and the expat community in Barcelona is extensive. Is an understatement. The number of things to do in that city and in Spain in general. I mean, there's meetup.com, there's Facebook groups, there's a thing called Internations. There's so many things, like there's so much that goes on that I don't understand how a person could ever be bored or get bored. Like it's not possible. There's just way too much to do. My problem was when I first got there, I was doing too much. And I remember saying to a friend of mine one time, I was like, if I put as much time into my work as I did my social life, like I would be way better off. But it was all new and it was great. And there was so much to do. And so that's important if for somebody who's outgoing, now I'm spending quite a bit of time in Montenegro, and it's a lot quieter. There aren't the meetup groups. There aren't a lot of expats. There's some, and there's some groups, but it's not as regular. There's not as much to do. There's a lot of outdoor activities. So I have found it is a little bit harder to connect with some people and make friends here compared to in Barcelona. But I've been traveling quite a bit too. So it's in part my fault because I'm gone a lot and traveling quite a bit as well. So that is definitely some things that people need to take into consideration as well. So for you, what's been let's talk about your residency process and how that went for you. What have been some of the challenges? Was there, probably not, but I'll say, was there anything that was easier than you thought of? Yeah, tell us how your residency process has been going and your plan on getting citizenship and how that's working for you.
Yes, absolutely. So I feel like Costa Rica actually makes it fairly easy to become a resident if you want to. There's a pathway. There's three main pathways. One is a pensionado, and that's basically, I've come to Costa Rica with a pension. Well, it could be Social Security, it could be, you know, a work pension, a government pension, whatever, where you prove you've got income for the rest of your life, right? So you can do it that way. And it's just a minimum of $1,000 a month. So it's super easy to qualify, and you can go from there.
So just so sorry to interrupt a little bit, because it's not a high amount. Do you think $1,000 a month is enough for a single person or a couple to live in Costa Rica?
I do not think so. I think that figure, especially today, is too low. It should be double that.
Okay.
I think, you know, could you live on 1,000? Actually, probably not almost anywhere in Costa Rica now. If you bumped it up to 1,500, yeah, you're going to give up a lot of luxuries, but you could do it. I'd say a lot more comfort zone in the 2,000 to 2,500. And that's lower end. That's lower end, but definitely you could live on that.
Right. So good. Just to be clear, because some people have the assumption, which is an understandable assumption, that, well, if I can move there and this is all the income that I have to prove, then it must be manageable for me to live if that's all I have to prove, because why would they give me a residency if I don't have enough money to make a to live off of? So
yeah. It's one of those government conundrums, because the next category is the rentista. Now, this one, you don't really qualify because you don't have a pension, but you don't have enough money, or you don't want to invest. So you can take 60,000 US dollars and put it in a Costa Rican bank to prove that you have money to live for 2 years of your first temporary residency. But that's basically, the math is withdrawing $2,500 a month. So there's a huge disparity there. So yeah, the rentista basically says you need $2,500 to live each month.
It is interesting. And maybe with the 1,000 that they're assuming that a retired person's going to buy a house, so they won't have any rent.
Right.
Buying, maybe there's an assumption that there's going to be purchases, but there's no need, like there's not a proof or a have to buy. So it's very interesting. And that's, you know, like, that's not just a little bit of a difference. That's a big difference between 1,000 and 2,500. Yep.
Significant. So those are the first two pathways. The other one is the investor. And in this one, you can invest in anything in the country. Typically, it's your home or your vacation home, but you could invest in a business, some sort of government funded thing where if that's what you want to invest in, good luck. But yeah, so they just lowered that amount. I believe it was 200,000 and now it's 150,000. So that was the route that we took, because we didn't have any sort of pension at that time. So we bought our condo and met the limit, and then we were able to apply for residency. We did hire a Costa Rican attorney, and she was excellent. I don't recommend doing it on your own, especially if you don't speak Spanish or you don't know the system, right? So she was fabulous. She gave us a checklist immediately and said, here's everything you're going to need from your home country.
Okay.
Right? And here's the process to do that and get the apostille. I know Canada doesn't do those, but most people, if they're global citizens, are familiar with that process where you have to, in the United States, it goes to the Secretary of State. And it's basically just another stamp.
They love those stamps. They love those stamps.
It's like an international notary, right? So, yeah. So we had the checklist. We went back to the States because it was easier to do it rather than mailing back and forth all these documents. We had to have all the typical things: birth certificates, marriage certificate, state criminal background, as well as an FBI background check.
Okay.
So then we returned with all that. The fees were at that time about $2,500.
Okay.
And start to finish, this is from the filing to when we actually had approval, was about 13 months, 14 months.
Okay.
I've heard of quicker, but
Mhm.
right now it's definitely longer.
It seems everything everywhere right now is longer. It's interesting. They use the excuse of COVID, but I thought, well, if people are still working from home during COVID, things should have still been getting done and people weren't applying. So the process actually should have been faster because they should have been caught up. Right?
Frustrating. Yeah. So in Costa Rica, if you haven't had a child in Costa Rica or married a local Tico, you have 2 years initially of temporary residency.
Okay.
Then you reapply. It's a much easier process to reapply. And then at that point, you're valid for another 3 years. But in the first year of that new application, you can apply for permanent residency.
Okay.
So we chose to go that pathway. It doesn't make a big difference, except once you have permanent residency, it's much more difficult to deport you if for some reason you ended up in a little bit of trouble. And you can legally work.
Okay.
Right. So that's that for some people, that's a big one, especially if you don't have a work visa, which is difficult to get.
Yes. Yeah. It would be very difficult to get.
Yeah. So that was our process. Looking back, I hear these horror stories of people going through it, and I'm like, oh my God, how did we do that? Because it's frustrating. I mean, it's not, oh, we just apply and sit back and wait. No, you have to go for an interview. You have to be fingerprinted. And at that time, so we live in a small coastal town called Tamarindo, which is close to the provincial capital of Liberia. But at that time, they didn't have all the same government offices that they do now. So we had to make the trek to the capital in San Jose, which is a good 4.5 hour drive, depending on where you're going. And depending on when you can get the appointment, it involves spending a night. So it's much easier now in that way, for especially for the people who live up in the north.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And also, I'm sure that it's not like you're getting it all done in one day. You're not having your interview and your fingerprints and things. So it's not just one trip.
a little back and forth.
Yeah. So it's manageable, and it's interesting. It's I think what a lot of people going through the process is we always think it's like when I was in Costa Rica, people are like, oh, Costa Rica is the worst. And then when I was in Spain, I'm like, oh, Spain is the worst. And then everywhere is, quote, the worst. But what it is, it's dealing with any government makes you have patience. You have to have patience. Yeah. You have to just wait. I one time I was told with one of my residencies, oh yeah, you'll have it in about 2 months. And I think it was 10 months later, I was like, this is a long 2 months. And I couldn't leave the country because I was in the process to get residency. So I had planned to leave because I go back to Canada every year to visit family and friends and things like that. And I was like, I can't. I can't leave the country. Like, oh, I could have, but then there had been you're over your time, and I could have been, well, I'm in the system, but I'm applying, and it just, and then it came down to when I talked to my lawyer, she said, well, you can try, but it's up to you can go to the police station and get a letter, and it's up to the officer that you talk to if he wants to give you one or not. Like
Right.
there's no law that states, and
What?
she's like, so if he's
What?
having a bad day, he's just gonna be like, no, too bad. It's like, yep.
It's
Oh my
interesting because,
gosh.
I follow a lot of expat groups and talk to quite a few people also. And it is, you're right, it's the same. And I've talked to people in Mexico, which is actually a very easy and straightforward process. And they're like, oh my God, the Mexican government.
Yeah. Yeah.
So part two of your question about
Mhm.
citizenship. I truly believe a second passport is essential if you're a global citizen.
It's essential for everyone, even somebody who's not a global citizen. I think it's essential for every human being to get a second citizenship.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that I don't qualify by ancestry in either channel on either parental side. So we revert back to Costa Rica, and I've been there quite a while now. So if you don't have a child or married a local and you're not Latino or Latina, you have to wait 7 years of your residency. It starts with the temporary, so 7 years, you can apply for naturalization for citizenship. Come to find out, I reached out to my attorney. I'm like, hey, I'm over my 7-year mark. Let's do this. What do I need to do to study for the exam? Which is challenging because it is in Spanish. If you're not a native Spanish speaker, it's a little tricky. I've seen some of the questions.
Okay.
And you have to know geography very well. You have to know social studies. You have to know history. It's pretty challenging, and a lot of the gringos do not pass on the first try.
Okay.
I mean, about 50%. So
wow. Okay. So it's not just a walk in the park, answer a few questions,
you're right,
and I'm done.
right. So I reached out and she said, okay, here's the deal. You have to be not 7 years, but 7 years worth of days spent in the country.
That's a completely different.
Right. So 365 days
Times
seven. Right. And we're global citizens. We return to the United States, but we also spend a lot of time traveling. That's, something I love. We just spent 3 months in Europe this year. So, okay, there goes 3 months and another 3-month chunk and another 3-month chunk. So we're looking at possibly a full 10 years.
Wow.
Before I'll qualify. Right. So I didn't realize that little.
And
caveat.
that little caveat is a big deal. That is it's a big deal, because lots of times when you search anywhere, residency anywhere in the world, and by naturalization, they generally say 7 to 10 years. If you've been a resident for, let's just say 7 years, you'll get it, but none of them actually specify if it is just having residency for 7 years, or as they have in Costa Rica, being in Costa Rica for the equivalent of 7 full-time years.
Right. So I continue to wait because this is my best second passport option.
And you've put years in already. You're years in already. Yeah. You got lots of time to study for that test now.
Right. Besides buying one, and they're as you've researched and talked to experts, there's, the cheapest one is what, 150,000?
You're looking at least 150,000 minimum. And that usually is just for one person, doesn't include spouse or dependents or anything. So yeah, a minimum 150, most are closer to the $500,000 to $1 million mark.
Million, right. I researched Malta, and their passports are about $1 million.
Yeah.
And then you have to buy property too. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not, if you're a multi-millionaire, then I guess you really have no concerns and no issues. You can just buy yourself a citizenship. But for the vast majority of the world, if we don't have it through ancestry, then we have to find a place that we're going to love, we're going to enjoy, we are going to want to live there and put in the time.
Right. And the great thing is, I love Costa Rica. It's a great place to have residency and to call home for part of the year.
Right.
As I said, we're global citizens and we spend time in the US still. We
Mhm.
own property here still, and some rental property, which allows us to have this lifestyle.
Right.
And after lockdowns, we realized that the town is a little bit small for us. I come
Mhm.
from a big city, and we'd like to spend some time around more history and the arts and things like that. So we're also looking at options in Europe, including Malta, which has been kind of on the top of our list, as you know.
Yes.
And you're going to see what that looks like too. And if you do it right, you can have residences in several countries. When you're
Absolutely.
not there,
Mhm.
rent them out.
Mhm.
So they're actually income producing places,
Mhm.
and you can continue to live this rock star lifestyle without being a rock star at all.
Right, right. And it is, and people, it's interesting that it can be done. It's not always simple. It's easy, but it's not simple in the
Right,
fact that
right.
it's easy to do these things, but you have to have the knowledge, you have to have the
Mhm.
patience, you have to have the time, and you have to have a plan. Because as
Yep.
we were saying at the very beginning, too many people just say, "Oh, I'm just going to go." Too many people do what I do, and I don't recommend people to do things that I do because I'm a little bit crazy. I do things
I know,
not in the
I know
best
that.
way. I just decide to move and I just up and go, and
Yeah.
that's just it. Or I go someplace, and 3 days, for some reason, the 3 day mark. When I was researching Costa Rica, and on day 3 of being there for the very first time, I bought property. When I was in Spain, I was in Barcelona with a friend. I was there for a week for my birthday, and I'd been traveling around lots before that. And in 3 days, I was like, "Yeah, Barcelona. This can be my next home base for a while." And I ended up getting residency and
Mhm.
living there for many years. And then I was like, I need a place. So I had sold my place in Canada, and I'm like, I need to invest somewhere. And
Yeah.
within a very short period of time, I bought property in another country
Mhm.
as well. And so I don't recommend people to do things the way that I do them, but it's different though too, because now it's just me, right? I'm
Right.
I'm single and it's just me. So for me, part of my brain is, if I don't like it, I can just leave. I don't have to worry about another person. I don't have to worry about another person's job. I don't have to worry about,
Right.
are they okay with it or not, because it is just me. So it makes it
Right.
easier for me that if I don't like where I'm at, and I don't spend a lot of time in one place because I do travel quite a bit.
Mhm.
So it's easier. But if somebody really wants to settle, and I'm kind of at that point too, where I'm like, okay, I'm traveling so much, like I really should kind of have a bit more for roots for somewhere and good friends and things like that. So
Right.
there's I do get pulled in different directions, but it's important to know what a person wants. Like I love
Right.
Montenegro. It's great, but it's not full time. I won't ever
Right.
live in Montenegro full time. It's too small. There's not enough going on. But
Mhm.
I love it when I
Mhm.
come here and I'm here for a few weeks, maybe a month, and I enjoy it. And then in about a month's time, I'm like, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm ready for something a little bit more action, more
Yeah.
going on. But then, and I'm always busy, travel, 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 so much going on. And when I come back, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
it's nice to just chill, be here, my space, my stuff, my whatever. And so it's important for people to know themselves and who they are. And especially if they have a spouse or a partner or children, that's a whole other. And I did
Right.
that with my daughter, as you know, moving to Costa Rica. So things are different for different people, and you need to take those things into consideration.
Right. Right. And things change with age too.
Yes.
You know. Yeah, that uptown party life is great, but all of a sudden you're staring down 50, and it's like, yeah, I don't know. I can just hang out and relax and read a book and be okay. So
Hmm.
it changes, and as humans we can change and evolve too. And
Hmm.
I love the idea as a global citizen to truly be global.
Hmm.
A friend of mine years ago planted the seed of five flags.
Okay.
Five
Yep.
flags. And I was like, what is this five flags? And she said, diversify your life. and have something under 5 different flags, whether it's
Mhm.
owning property, whether it's a second or a third passport, whether it's a bank account or an investment in something.
Mhm.
But cover yourself with 5 flags. If one government goes awry, or the currency becomes worthless, you're still afloat because you've got
Mhm.
4 other flags or 3 other flags. And that really hit home with me. And
Yeah.
I'm working on some more flags.
It's good. I think the more flags, the better. And as you brought up the one with bank accounts, I think
Mhm.
the absolute first step or least thing that a person should do is open up another bank account in another country.
Mhm.
And for a number of reasons. Recently, well, I say recently, but it's been several months now, in Canada, there was protests going on with truckers,
Mhm. Mhm.
and the government decided to freeze their bank accounts. And even people that
Mhm.
donated, the government froze some of their bank accounts. What would you do if all of a sudden, for protesting, which you are legally have the right to protest, it's part of democracy, like you have the right to
Mhm.
protest, to all of a sudden the government saying, oh, well, now we're freezing your bank account. How do you pay your bills? How do you pay your mortgage? Like, now you're asking your friends and family to borrow money to then get a lawyer to wait for it to be unfrozen, or however long it's going to last. And that's one aspect. What
Yeah.
about the other of identity theft? It happens. Identity theft, and all of a sudden, all your,
Yeah.
or they get your bank card and all your money's gone, and you have to wait
Right.
for the process to get it all back, or to prove that it wasn't you. And hackers now, like, there's
Yes.
hackers that can hack the entire bank. So not even just an individual, but an entire bank. And so if you have everything in that one, it's
Mhm.
high. It really is high risk, where even if you have another
Absolutely.
bank account with a few $1,000s in it,
Right.
the more the better, of course, but
Survival.
just have it. And every bank gives a bank card. So you can always, so if something happens, at least you have that backup bank card that you can use. You can pay your bills, you can buy some groceries, you can get a lawyer if you need a lawyer, if it's like identity theft or something. And then you're
Right.
not, asking friends and family members, and who knows if they're able to help, if whatever their financial situation is. So it is one, I always say, it's like the very first thing, the
Mhm.
most important, is
Mhm.
to have another bank account in another country.
Right. And some countries make it extremely difficult to open a bank
Mhm.
account, but you
Mhm.
can do these online bank accounts that are based in, Lithuania or
Right.
something like that. So
Mhm.
there are options out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So very, very, very important. Um, so I can talk to you forever, obviously, Kathleen, and
Right.
we could talk about so many things, but
Right. So
um,
your audience doesn't know this, but Sally and I and another partner drove across India in an auto rickshaw in a challenge, a fundraising challenge in 10 days. And we won out of 13, was it 13
I think it was
international
13.
teams?
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
We were lucky
So
number 7, cart number
lucky
007.
007. Yeah.
Yes. So our listeners, you are listening to 2 out of 3 of our team that are actual world champions. It's
Yeah, that's right.
not many people that know that about me. I don't go around and be like, hey, I'm a world champion, because I never thought I ever would be. But just part of some of the fun adventures that we do. There's
Yeah.
a bit of a saying I have. Obviously for this, it's live your best life. And I think everybody should really live their best life. And another one that I go by is, you will die, but not everyone will live. And
Right.
it's true. Like, every single one of us will die. We
Mhm.
just don't know when, but not every single one of us actually live.
Yeah,
And
that's spot
so
on.
having, to me, having a global citizen lifestyle, or at least the option, it doesn't mean people have to do it right now. I get, if you have children, they're in school and things like that, but you can start planning. You can start by opening a bank account. You can do their summer vacations to check out different countries, different destinations, to seeing what you might like. But everybody will die, but not everyone will live. So
Right.
I think it's really important that we live. So as a last question, Kathleen, what piece of advice would you give somebody about becoming a global citizen?
Ooh. Woohoo! Let's see. Well, obviously, do your research first off, right? And just start the process now. Little things, as you mentioned. If there's a country that really feels good, but you're not sure, if you can work from anywhere, and a lot of people can now, look into the possibility of a digital nomad visa. Costa Rica has just launched theirs, and it is actually a very simple process to apply for it. All you have to do is prove that you make money. It's $36,000 a year, and a little bit more if you're bringing a family with you, but it's good for a year. You can reapply if you love it. They'll allow you to bring anything you need for your job tax-free. You can open a bank account with no issue. Your driver's license remains valid for the full year. You don't have to leave the country. And it's a great way to put your toe in the water and see if this is right for you. And, it doesn't have to be an income per se. If you have any kind of annuity or Social Security, that would qualify too. So, you can look into something like that, test the waters, see if it feels right. And then you can go back to plan A if plan B doesn't work. There's all kinds of options.
Right.
So just do your research.
Yes, definitely. All right. Well, thank you very much, Kathleen, for joining us today. Of course, it's always wonderful to talk with you, and thank you for sharing all the information with our listeners.
Yeah, that was super fun. Thanks for having me.